Hi everyone and welcome. While you're joining us, feel free to put where you're joining us from in the chat, say hello. We're going to be starting in 1 or 2 minutes just to let other people join. Please forgive, I have a little dog who's wandering around behind me and she's clicky-clacking on her nails, so you might hear that noise in the background. But we're all animal people here, so that's to be expected. All right, let's get started, shall we? Hi everyone and welcome to this webinar. I'm Liz Tyson-Griffin. I'm Programs Director for Born Free USA. Those of you unfamiliar with our work, Born Free works to protect wild animals in their natural environment, in captivity and from exploitative and cruel practices, just like the ones we're going to be discussing today. We're part of the worldwide Born Free family, which operates across 5 continents and is a global leader in animal welfare and wildlife conservation. Now, last month, we released our newest investigative report exploring the dark world of thrill killing of wild animals in the United States. We looked at killing contests, canned hunting of exotic species, some of those threatened and some even extinct in the wild, rattlesnake roundups, and pay-to-kill experiences where companies rent out seats in aircraft for people who want the experience of killing wild pigs using fully automatic weapons. While this subject matter is undeniably upsetting, we believe that it's essential to shed light on these practices, as only by doing so can we work towards change. And helping us do that today are our 3 expert speakers whose work on these issues are making crucial inroads towards consigning these egregious forms of animal cruelty to history. We're joined today by Katie Stennes, Programs Manager for Wildlife Protection at the Humane Society of the United States. She'll be talking to us about killing contests and what you can do to help stop them. Melissa Amarello joins us from Advocates for Snake Preservation, where she is Executive Director. She'll be talking about her organization's vital work to end cruel rattlesnake roundups. And finally, Samantha Hagio, Director in Wildlife Protection, again from the Humane Society of the United States, will be sharing her work on bringing an end to canned hunting in the USA. Really excited to hear from our experts today and learn what we can all do to be part of the change for these animals that they so desperately need. So let me begin by introducing Katie. Katie's worked in the animal protection field for 10 years, including 6 years spent working to ban wildlife killing contests in states across the country. She's worked on successful campaigns to end killing contests in Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington, and continues to pursue campaigns in other key areas. Katie received a JD from the University of Minnesota Law School and a BA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, and today she's going to be sharing her work with us. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me today. So yeah, I am the program manager at the Humane Society of the United States in the Wildlife Protection Department. I kind of oversee our campaign to end killing contests in the various states. Today I'm going to be talking about killing contests, what they are, the ethical issues that they pose, and then I'll talk about the growing movement to ban them and who's behind it. So while it may come as no surprise that the general public opposes killing contests, stakeholders with widely differing viewpoints and views about wildlife, values about wildlife, are working together toward ending these unpopular competitions. I do want to warn you that I'll be showing some graphic images. It's just the nature of killing contests and it can't be avoided, but I'll give you a heads up. I'll be showing a video and I'll give you a heads up before I show that. Is my screen sharing? Okay. Can you see this?
No, yet.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay. You can see that now, Katie.
All right, thanks. All right, so killing contests are a blood sport similar to dogfighting or cockfighting. They're organized events during which participants compete to kill animals, the largest, the smallest, or the most animals for cash and prizes, sometimes including AR-15s style weapons. They typically take place over 1 or 2 days. After the killing is over, the participants gather to weigh and count the bodies, take photos next to piles of dead animals, and collect their prizes. At any given event, hundreds of animals might be killed. The animals are then dumped like trash. They are not killed for their meat, and even the high power rifles will rip holes in the animal's fur, so even their fur is rendered useless. So when we're talking about killing contests, we're not talking about the hunting of these species. We are talking about organized events to mass kill unprotected species for cash and prizes. Coyotes, foxes, and bobcats are the most common targets of killing contests, but many other animals, including rabbits, squirrels, prairie dogs, crows, even wolves and mountain lions in some instances have fallen victims to these events. The animals tend to be historically persecuted species that receive few protections under the law, and so they can be mass killed in unlimited numbers year-round. We estimate that at least 700 contests are taking place every year in the US, in almost all of the 42 states that still allow them. Here's a current snapshot of killing contests in the US. The red and brown markers indicate contests for carnivore and non-carnivore species like raccoons that are still taking place. And then the yellow markers show contests that no longer can take place because the state has since banned them. So HSUS has gone undercover at 14 killing contests in 9 states across the country. I'm going to show you a video now of footage from these events, and they do contain graphic images of dead animals. Oh.
We thought we could do that. What did you guys get?
You guys got 7? 9 coyotes, 1 fox.
In first place, they only killed 1 coyote, but they had an impressive 17 fox.
Blew out the whole bottom of his chest. But these are not very fur-friendly.
Just enjoyable. You know, it's just the thrill, you know?
What do you use to shoot? What do you use?
AR-15.
AR-15?
The night vision.
Uh-huh.
So while participants thrive on the thrill of the kill, cash is the big draw, and many contests are extremely high stakes. So nearly $400,000 in prize money was doled out at the West Texas Big Bobcat contest last year, and the death toll was staggering. A single two-man team killed 87 foxes in less than 24 hours. So how is it that just a two-man team can kill 87 foxes in less than 24 hours? Well, these animals are being killed using really high-tech equipment, expensive equipment that runs into the thousands of dollars, and it completely overwhelms the animal's natural ability to escape. So they're using spotlights to shine lights into the field to spot the animals. They're then using electronic calling devices to lure animals into gun range using sounds that mimic the sounds of animals in distress, coyote pups in distress. And then they shoot the animals using AR-15 style weapons fitted with night vision and thermal imaging scopes. In Texas, they use a practice called trolling, where they ride around in comfy chairs that are attached to raised decks on top of their trucks, and they just go around shooting any animal that they can see. In recent years, major media outlets have covered this topic. In 2017, the Chicago Tribune editorialized against coyote killing contests in support of a ban on them. And days later, the New York Times covered the squirrel slam in upstate New York. And since then, outlets across the country have covered the topic, including most recently a major expose in National Geographic. So this media attention has led to swift action on the behalf of state policymakers in some states. 8 states have banned killing contests. In 2014, California became the first state. And since then, 7 states, including Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Washington, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Vermont, they have all banned killing contests. Some did it through the state legislature and some did it through the state wildlife agency. In 2023, we're working in a number of states, Oregon, Nevada, New Jersey, and New York, to ban contests. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, the New York State Legislature passed a bill to ban killing contests. And this is really exciting. And so if the governor signs the bill, they'll become the 9th state to ban contests. While animal advocates have obviously been out front trying to ban these contests nationwide, hunters also have too. And it's been interesting with animal advocates and hunters kind of working together to ban these contests. 5 of the 8 states that banned contests did so through the state wildlife agency. And state wildlife agencies are really interested in protecting the hunting community. They are made up of a lot of hunters. They want to protect the hunting community. And they also care about wildlife science and what the science shows. And we found that these 5 states banned contests because they were trying to protect the reputation of their hunting community and because they recognize that the science does not support wildlife killing contests. So as I mentioned, these state wildlife agencies and hunters are concerned that contests are damaging the reputation of hunters and possibly even threatening the future of hunting in itself in America. The Arizona Game and Fish Commission in 2019, when it banned contests, stated, to the extent these contests reflect on the overall hunting community, public outrage with these events has the potential to threaten hunting as a legitimate wildlife management function. And many other state agency professionals and hunters have made similar statements. And they have good reason to be concerned. As this graph shows, hunting for a trophy is extremely unpopular. As you can see, it's at the bottom of the list here. And this graph shows people's support for hunting for various reasons. So for meat, if you're hunting for meat, support is very high. But hunting for a trophy is very low. And as the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources stated a couple of years ago when they were considering banning contests, they thought that hunting for during killing they thought support for killing contests would be even less than it is when hunting for a trophy. A national poll by Remington Research Group last year found that 80% of Americans support a ban on killing contests or are opposed to killing contests. Tony Wasley, the former president of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and the former director of the Nevada Department of Wildlife, recently stated that killing contests are ethically upsetting for most members of society. Hunting should not be a competition, as such behavior ultimately degrades the value of life and undermines respect for the animals being hunted. So killing contest participants are constantly using myths about carnivore species, especially like coyotes and foxes, to fuel the bloodshed. They're claiming that these coyotes are overrunning communities, decimating communities, killing pets and livestock and even children, and just coming up with these ridiculous statements that are completely false about coyotes and foxes and bobcats. And it's helped to perpetuate these contests because it justifies that these animals need to be killed in unlimited numbers. But the truth, the best available science shows that killing coyotes does not reduce their numbers. And in fact, it can increase their numbers by disrupting the coyote pack social structure. So scientists across the country, including some of the nation's leading carnivore experts, have spoken out against killing contests and called on state policymakers to ban them. And that's for this reason. Killing contests also do not boost populations of game species like deer or turkey for hunters, even though contest participants claim that they're doing this service. It's just not true. Science shows that killing coyotes will not boost populations of game species, and because deer populations, turkey, they're all dictated by habitat. They need good habitat, and that's the primary factor in healthy populations of deer and turkey. Killing contests will also not prevent conflicts with livestock and can even increase them. In fact, USDA data shows that all carnivores combined, including dogs, coyotes, hawks, and wolves, are responsible for less than 0.5% of cattle and sheep losses in the US. A recent study found that, in fact, killing coyotes can increase conflicts with livestock by, again, disrupting that coyote pack structure. And coyotes actually can be, it's a joke that the livestock that scientists use is coyotes can be used as livestock protectors, like guard dogs, like guard animals, like guard dogs. Wildlife management professionals across the country have even found that coyotes are beneficial to ranchers and farmers. This cattle rancher and member of the Washington State Fish and Wildlife Commission, Molly Linville, stated that coyotes were her only free employees on the ranch. She has a big cattle ranch, and she found that killing contest participants were coming onto her property, disrupting her property, and the symbiosis that she had with her guardian dogs and coyotes. They kind of had this great relationship where they were protecting her crops from voles and moles that can damage crops. So in New York, where we have our bill, I just mentioned that bill passed the legislature a couple weeks ago. We have this farmer sign-on letter. It's been signed by over 50 farmers across the state in support of the ban on killing contests, which is really remarkable. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Just amazing to see these bans kind of perhaps not sweeping the country yet, but certainly kind of making inroads there and showing what can be possible. And wonderful news about New York. Karen and I, my colleague, were just chatting behind the scenes saying that we weren't aware of those moves. So thank you so much for your work on this. It looks like you're doing fantastic work and really making a difference here. All right, let's move on to Melissa. So Melissa's lifelong fascination with snakes led her to work on a variety of projects of natural history and conservation of reptiles in Arizona, California, and Mexico. In the spring of 2014, she co-founded Advocates for Snake Preservation with Jeff Smith to change how people view and treat snakes. Melissa received her degree in wildlife, watershed, and rangeland resources at the University of Arizona and her master's in biology at Arizona State University, where she studied rattlesnake social behavior. Now, Melissa's going to be talking specifically about rattlesnake roundups, which is a form of killing contest that we feel is really overlooked because snakes are often maligned in ways that mammals are not. So really pleased to have Melissa here with us today. Melissa, handing over to you now. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Hope everybody can see my screen. So yeah, I'm going to talk to y'all about rattlesnake roundups. So yeah, so some of this is going to be a bit of a review. So yeah, I'm Melissa, I'm the executive director and co-founder of Advocates for Snake Preservation. My partner, Jeff Smith, and I founded this organization to change how people view and treat snakes. We both came from a background of like field biology research related to the conservation of reptiles and amphibians. And through that work and our interactions with the public, we realized that it's really hard to do conservation without public support. And it's really hard to get public support for an animal that is so misunderstood, or I should say a group of animals that are so misunderstood and maligned in every type of media available as snakes. And so that's why we kind of pivoted and started this organization instead of continuing on in science. So Advocates for Snake Preservation, we do education, we do science, mostly studying natural history and behaviors. So we have some cool things about snakes to talk about, and we do some advocacy. And the bulk of our work is providing solutions to human-snake conflicts that sometimes end badly for people and often prove fatal for snakes. We also tell stories about wild snake behavior, and this is both to counter prevailing myths and make snakes more familiar and less scary. And that is definitely like my most favorite part of this job is getting to give presentations kind of like this, where I get to tell these stories and share these awesome videos of snakes in the wild. Unfortunately, this is not exactly what we're doing today. But I hope if you're into snakes, like you'll check some of those out because we do have some of them available online. So today I'm talking about rattlesnake roundups. And although primarily our work is in public education about snakes themselves, occasionally there are issues that are too pressing to ignore and wait for that long game of changing hearts and minds. And there's not really another organizations focused on snakes to take on some of these issues. I mean, there are organizations that do snake stuff, but not specifically about snakes. And even the general sort of reptile conservation groups are really hesitant to jump into advocacy and work like this. So rattlesnake roundups were an issue that I've known about since I was little. I kind of grew up watching nature documentaries with my grandma, and whenever there was one focused on snakes, they would kind of end it with, oh, and then there are these cutesy little festivals called rattlesnake roundups. And I just remember being heartbroken by that as a kid. It made quite an impression. I never forgot about it. And so when we started this organization, we pretty quickly decided this was something that we wanted to see if we could work on. So like Katie, I want to give a warning about the video I'm about to show. Joanne MacArthur, a photojournalist who does a lot of really amazing work on animal issues, and I went to the Sweetwater Rattlesnake Roundup, which is one of the largest, perhaps the largest and certainly the most famous rattlesnake roundup. We went there in 2015, and this was a video we made for our campaign the following year to raise awareness about rattlesnake roundups. And it does a much better job than I could, like, going through it all. So I'm just gonna play it. It's about 5 minutes long. So if you wanna, like, you know, go get a cup of coffee or whatever and come back, you've got about 5 minutes.
We still get 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of snakes a year. And this is our 57th year. Now, the reason they started the roundup is there were snakes coming in town with grass. The police was having more snake calls than being able to do anything else.
Rattlesnake at the school, there's a rattlesnake in my house. It saved my children, saved my pets, you know, and especially a livestock.
So the hunters and the ranchers around town, farmers, they decided, well, we'll just get rid of the rattlesnake. They were the first ones to do any snake roundup. And they took them, they killed them. They didn't do anything, but they just killed them, put them in a barrel and burned them. The JCs said, well, we ought to have many snakes, and after they seen how many they caught, they said, well, we can do something with this. So they started doing this. We have people that buys them, and we sell them to them. But everything that's here will be processed this year.
More than 250,000 rattlesnakes have been killed in the Sweetwater Rattlesnake Roundup since 1959. Snakes are often kept for weeks or months without food or water in crowded, filthy conditions. Most rattlesnakes are taken from the wild by gassing. Gasoline or other toxins are poured into their winter dens, which drives the rattlesnakes to the surface where they can be caught. It's hard for people to empathize with snakes. They don't look like us. They don't express emotions the way we do. They're usually portrayed in myth and media legend as evil, villainous, cold-blooded killing machines. Rattlesnakes are actually shy, gentle creatures who just want to be left alone. They form social bonds with other individual snakes we might call friends. Rattlesnakes give birth to live young and they care for their babies. There are even babysitters or helpers who will watch over another rattlesnake's young when the mother is not with them. By the time they arrive at the roundup, they're bruised, bloody, swollen, and too weak to do more than hide their head in fear. The constant buzz of snakes rattling is not the sound of angry animals waiting for their chance to attack. It's the sound of 1,000 snakes screaming. At roundups like Sweetwater, snakes are shot in the head with a bolt gun, decapitated by machete, skinned and gutted. Unlike humans and many other animals, snake brain tissue is slow to succumb to cessation of blood supply and oxygen, leaving the reptiles fully conscious, traumatized, and in incomprehensible pain. Their disembodied heads continue gasping, hearts beating, skinless bodies writhing long afterward.
We've had them beat for up to an hour. Eggs! No, not babies, eggs. Yeah. We're trying to maintain the population. So the reason why we started this was to go ahead and show awareness and safety of what to and not to do whenever you encounter a rattlesnake.
There are fewer than 5 deaths in the U.S. from snake bites annually, including people who refuse treatment. Most snake bites happen when people handle, approach, or try to kill the snake. Proponents of roundups say they prevent snake overpopulation and protect livestock from death by snakebite. However, the USDA's cattle death loss report has logged no cattle or sheep deaths from snakes in more than 2 decades. Paradoxically, proponents maintain roundups have no effect on local snake population, making it something of a mystery how they can also alleviate overpopulation. In a time when disconnect with nature is harming our health and the health of our planet, is this how we want to teach our children to interact with animals and the environment? Many rattlesnake roundups have evolved into educational festivals where no snakes are removed from the wild or killed, and people learn to appreciate their local wildlife. These festivals are just as popular and financially successful as those which kill. There is a better way. Stop the snake slaughter. Get involved at rattlesnakeroundups.com.
So that was a kind of sober introduction to what a rattlesnake roundup is. If you haven't heard about it, like I said, I've been familiar with these for a long time, but I realized that even people who live in the states where they occur and like very close to some of the towns where they occur don't know about it. And it's not like with a lot of the mammal killing contests that Katie mentioned, a lot of those are done very much in secret and only advertised to like, you know, people who attend them regularly. The rattlesnake roundups are very, very much public events where everyone is encouraged to come, both as a spectator and a participant. So this map is where in the world are these events, and so I've mapped a couple different things on here. And so this was this is like pretty much still up to date. So there are currently 13 rattlesnake roundups where snakes are still killed, and sort of for the same reasons gone over in the video and like Katie mentioned, for wildlife killing contests. Also mapped on here in northeastern Louisiana is a snake rodeo, which is in some ways actually more similar to a wildlife killing contest. And instead of being rattlesnake specific, it's basically just any type of snake you can get, which, you know, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to our website, or I'm happy to answer questions about it if there are times. Also on this map are some of the former rattlesnake roundups that have changed. And so there are 8 of those that are now no-kill educational events. They do this in different ways. Some of them still bring in snakes from the wild. That's the case with most of them in Pennsylvania. And actually the reason that they still involve wild snakes is because they switched from rattlesnake roundups where there's slaughter happening to using those events both for public education and for an annual count of timber rattlesnakes, are the species of rattlesnakes that they have there, and they're a species of concern in Pennsylvania. That's why they had to stop the killing contest aspect. But instead they had the same people and families who've been participating in those events for decades just sort of switched over to going to your same spot, collecting the snakes, bringing them in for them to be measured, and so they get an idea of how the populations are doing, and then they release them back where they were found at the end, and instead of killing them. So there are currently 3 states left that have of the slaughter type rattlesnake roundups. And just because I need a little I need a little room, because I realized when I was going over these slides this morning that it's just like all awful pictures. So this is a Western Diamondback mother admiring her baby. Her name is Madam X, and just so everyone knows, she is far enough away where she will never have to worry about a rattlesnake roundup. But I wanted to go over a few bits of hope. I mean, like I said, we did our initial campaign about rattlesnake roundups in 2016, and that was mainly to raise awareness about the events, even though they're public and they actually get quite a bit of media attention. The media attention is largely, or was largely, positive for the events. If they mentioned any sort of criticism at all, it was written off in kind of that usual sort of curt way of like, oh, just crazy animal rights activists don't like this. They never addressed any of the other concerns. And so what we did in 2015, by going and getting our own footage and pictures, and then We did a big press push in 2016 to just to cover the issues surrounding rattlesnake roundups and to let people know that there are a lot of different types of people who don't like these events. I mean, like Katie said, there are a lot of hunters that don't like events like this because this is not hunting. There's no sport here. You know, using gasoline to force somebody from their resting place. Yeah, it's not really a sport. There's basically no efforts made in any of these places to try to assess the impact of these events on the population of snakes or the ecosystem at large, of which snakes are an important part of. And so we just wanted to raise awareness about that. And, you know, since then, we've gone from about 30 rattlesnake roundups where snakes were still killed down to 13 that I know of now. And the very last one in Georgia, so we went from 4 states down to 3 states, that one flipped to a no-kill educational event. They made that announcement in 2021. They didn't hold it that year because of the pandemic. So last year they held their first one. They did it again this year. And as mentioned in the video, like most of the places that have gone with the no-kill event, they're even more popular than before, not just because society at large is just not as supportive of these types of events, but also a lot of the organizations and individuals that were protesting and fighting to have these events changed are now supporting, promoting, and even participating in the new events. And, you know, in addition to some of those rays of hope and change, we did a very different sort of rattlesnake roundup campaign this year that was just, it still remains one of the brightest spots of the year. So we called it Rattlesnake Love Letters. And basically what we did was we got teachers, scout leaders, and even some super enthusiastic parents to get their kids to write letters. So we supplied them with age-appropriate information about rattlesnake roundups to share with the kids, and then encourage the kids to write letters like with their own feelings about either rattlesnakes or the roundups, and then sent those to real people that live in Sweetwater, home to the most famous rattlesnake roundup. And about 1,000 households in Sweetwater received one of these letters. And, you know, it's kind of too early to say the roundup was already basically like in motion when these letters started arriving there. So it's too early to say if they'll have an effect on how that community views the roundup. But man, it sure made my year in a week that's normally one of the hardest. And I'm just sort of overloaded with images of what's going on there and positive media coverage for the roundup. And instead we got some media coverage for these love letters, and I got to see not all 1,000, but a lot of these letters, and they're just wonderful and adorable. So it was really great. So I think we're doing questions at the end. So that is all I got.
Melissa, thank you so much for your hard work for snakes and individualizing them and showing them as sentient beings that have lives outside of how we perceive them. I think also just to flag, even though it might not look like it with my suit jacket on today, but my other part of my role is managing our large primate sanctuary, which is based in South Texas, where rattlesnakes are abundant. And anybody who knows or lives in these kind of areas knows that there are other ways to deal safely with rattlesnakes. We never kill a rattlesnake on our site. They do pose a threat to our monkeys. And so we have a process where we humanely pick them up carefully, gently, we relocate them safely, and we put them in a place where they can cause no harm and where no harm will come to them. There are so many other ways of dealing with snakes that you don't necessarily want in your backyard, but certainly rattlesnake roundups are not the answer. I appreciate your work, Melissa, and your organization's work for making that change, and the love letters are just adorable. Right, let's move on now quickly to Samantha. We may run a little bit over. Please stay for questions at the end because I'm sure they're going to be fascinating. But let me introduce Samantha now. Samantha manages the team working to fight against the trophy hunting of native carnivores, bears, bobcats, mountain lions, and wolves, and canned hunting in the US. She's been with HSUS for over 13 years and has worked on multiple campaigns to both defend defend against harmful policies for wildlife and proactively fight against trophy hunting. She holds a JD from Stetson University College of Law and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from University of Tampa. And she's going to be talking to us today about canned hunting within the United States. Sam, I'll pass to you now.
Thanks, Liz. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see it. So first and foremost, I guess, what do we really mean when we say trophy hunting? A lot of people have different definitions about it. At the Humane Society of the United States, we've kind of defined trophy hunting as the practice of killing or pursuing with the intent to kill wild animals where the primary motivation is to obtain those animal parts. So their heads, their hides, their claws, skulls, or the entire whole stuffed animal, either for display or for bragging rights and prizes, but not for food. And while we do consider the hunting of all native carnivores in the US as trophy hunting, I think there's probably no better example of trophy hunting than so-called canned or captive hunting, because even if the hunter ultimately consumes the meat from an animal that they've killed at a canned hunt, that's definitely not the primary motivation behind that hunt. Like nobody is paying $20,000 to go shoot a white-tailed deer because they need to put food on the table. So canned hunts are basically just enclosures surrounded by a high escape-proof fence. Trophy animals are bred, stocked, and shot within the enclosures, and customers pay a fee for what's basically a guaranteed kill. And I'm going to show you a short video of an undercover investigation from the Humane Society of the United States. It is pretty old. I think it's from like 2010 or 2011, but unfortunately all of the information in there is sadly still relevant. And our undercover investigators went to 3 different canned hunts. In this video was in Texas and 2 were in New York, and it just really shows what a is like.
I think people are just shocked. They don't understand what drives someone to want to do it. What does it prove to have an animal's head on your wall, particularly in an instance when the animal didn't even have a chance to get away? The Humane Society of the United States investigators visited captive hunting ranches and exotic auctions in several states.
I don't have a gun license. Is that okay?
You don't need one. You don't need one.
Okay.
Endangered exotic animals being bought and sold just for the opportunity to feed.
So what's the kangaroo for?
Believe it or not, I got a guy that wants to shoot one down the road. This one's got a bounty on his head.
Captive hunt operators try to set it up to make it feel like a real hunting experience. Whether you agree with hunting or not is irrelevant. This requires no skill.
He likes it.
Our investigators were able to walk up and literally pet the animals or feed them by hand, like shooting an animal in a zoo. It's a setup from the beginning to the end. You're going to be guaranteed that kill because the ranch hand wants to make sure that he makes his buck, and he won't make any money unless you kill an animal and take that animal's head home with you.
I promise you, before this day over, you'll get your crack at them. So
even if you don't see an animal initially, the ranch hand will sometimes drive animals to you.
So you're going to push them from where?
We're going to push them this way.
I'm going to go up this way and go this side of it this time, making them up.
So you can literally sit in a blind, drinking hot coffee, with your camo on and pull a trigger when that animal meanders by you. Perhaps the most shocking part of our investigation was this information of a canned hunt operator injecting animals with sedatives.
I do a lot of tranquilizing.
Oh, how come?
I do it. People pay me.
It's a tragedy that ought to be illegal in this country.
So as you could probably see from the video, there's a pretty wide variety of species that can be killed on a canned hunt. I'd say the most common species are probably white-tailed deer and elk, but exotic species can be killed too. So for example, in Texas, which is easily the state with the most canned hunting ranches in the country, almost anything from what you see kangaroo to an endangered African antelope can be killed behind those fences. So this is a rough map of canned hunting laws by state. The dark blue states are the ones that have a complete prohibition on all of mammals. And then the light blue states have some kind of partial ban. So that can be anything from a limit to the number of canned hunts that can be permitted in the state, or it can be a ban on the types of species. So some states don't allow native species, some states don't allow exotic species. And then there can also be a grandfather clause. So existing facilities of a certain date can continue to operate, but no new facilities can open. So species that are also listed as threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act are actually even available to shoot at canned hunts. Obviously, the purpose of the Endangered Species Act is to conserve species, and the law definitely generally prohibits killing animals that are listed as threatened or endangered, but there is a loophole exception if that killing can be shown to, quote unquote, enhance the survival of the species in the wild, basically. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the canned hunting industry have used that exception to kind of sanction the killing of certain listed animals under the guise that killing promotes conservation. So, for example, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issues permits to captive hunting ranches to allow killing of endangered species if agree to donate 10% of their profits from selling those hunts of those species to industry groups such as Conservation Force or the Exotic Wildlife Association, but there's little to no oversight over whether those donations are actually doing anything to promote legitimate conservation projects. So in addition to those threatened and endangered species, there's plenty of other animals available to kill at these hunts. The ranches on their websites offer what I call like a menu animals, and the prices, as you can see, have a pretty wide range. I actually couldn't fit all of the species that the Ox Ranch sells on this slide. I think it's like 80 something that they offer, but you can see it ranges from like $1,500 to shoot an emu to $80,000 for a Cape buffalo. So it's a pretty wide range. It's also not uncommon for these ranches to offer a little disclaimer saying that they have additional species available upon request. So if they get a special order for an animal that's not listed on their website, they can reach out to roadside zoos or exotic animal breeders and dealers wherever they can find those animals. So canned hunts are essentially just a setup from start to finish. Even on the ranches that are thousands and thousands of acres, the animals are usually accustomed to eating at feeding stations at regular intervals. So the shooter will just be there waiting in a nearby hunting blind. This shot from the Ox Ranch. This is the where that menu list of animals was from. They actually have these live game camera shots and a form underneath the photos where you can reserve a specific animal to be killed. So fair chase is a concept that's pretty central to the philosophy of most people in the hunting community, in the ethical hunting community, and it just does not exist in canned hunts, right? The entire concept of shooting animals that are trapped within fenced enclosures could not contradict that principle more. And it's not uncommon for a canned hunt with thousands of acres to still offer a 100% success scare shoot an animal. And they almost always offer a no kill, no pay policy. And these ranches are a business and they only get paid if you kill an animal. So it's in their best financial interest to make sure that the hunt is successful. And ultimately, they're just pay to play operations for mostly wealthy folks who just want to get an impressive trophy to hang on their wall with their boots, putting in actual hunting time and effort. And you can see that like some of these ranches literally look like 5-star resorts. Some of them have like crazy amenities. Some of them host corporate retreat weekends, or they offer like photo safari tours of their animals. So these are not typical accommodations for like the standard fair chase hunting ranch. So animals on canned hunts, typically they come from private breeders, animal dealers, and even unaccredited roadside zoos and circuses. They're often sold at these really awful live animal auctions. And the animals on, they've often been hand raised, and sometimes they've even been bottle fed since they were little. So they've completely lost their natural fear of people. And breeding of white-tailed deer especially is sadly a really big growing industry in this country. So animals on these ranches, they're typically bred using super invasive and unnatural methods like artificial insemination, electroejaculation, and they create what some people refer to as these like Franken deer. The deer have grown antlers so large and grotesque that they can like barely lift their heads anymore. And you can kind of see the result of that genetic manipulation here. And the wildlife now, they're basically being bred like livestock, or like even like racehorses, I guess, with their different and bloodlines. These abnormally large antlers. The bigger, the better, of course. And a single straw of semen from one of these trophy bucks can cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So because of this, deer breeding just on its own, not even with all the other exotic animals on canned hunts, but just deer breeding on its own has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. So according to this report from 2017, the total impact of the deer breeding industry to the economy was $7.9 billion annually. And that includes everything associated with deer breeding, but it also includes the hunting of captive deer. But granted, this study was completed on behalf of the North American Deer Farmers Association, so we take it with a grain of salt. And this obsession with like abnormally large antlers, which is sometimes referred to as buck fever, has led a lot in the hunting community to speak out against canned hunting. So groups such as the Boone and Crockett Club, which kind of bills itself as the oldest wildlife conservation organization in North America, they've come out in strong opposition to canned hunting. Others include the Pope and Young Club, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and the Isaac Walton League have also been vocal in their opposition, kind of similar to wildlife killing contests and these rattlesnake roundups. There are fair chase ethical hunters and hunting groups speaking out against it. The Boone and Crockett Club even went a step further, and they actually prohibited any animals killed at canned hunts from being entered into their trophy record books, which is kind of the premier record keeping hunting trophy in the country. So gone so far as to ban hunting ranches from even using or advertising their scoring system on their websites. But luckily for canned hunters, good old Safari Club International kind of stepped in to fill that void. So they developed their own scoring system, and they, of course, allow canned hunt animals into their record. They even have their own category, call them estate animals. And they classify exotic species as non-indigenous or introduced animals. So apart from the ethical issues with canned hunts, they're also huge breeding grounds for disease. So they have all these other implications too. So some of you may have chronic wasting disease before, which is basically like mad cow disease, but it affects deer, elk, and other cervids. CWD is super infectious. There's no accepted cure, vaccine, or treatment for CWD, and it is fatal. And probably for the captive industry, there's no reliable live test for chronic wasting disease. So there's literally no way for any captive deer breeder to know that their herd of animals is healthy unless they literally kill all of them to test them. So the unnatural densities that kind of characterize these canned hunts, they're packing all these animals in enclosures, plus they're constantly moving live animals around to stock these facilities, is what contributes to the spread of CWD. CWD has already been found in 31 states, and it's been found in captive populations in 15 of those states. And CWD does present a really serious threat to native wildlife populations. CWD outbreaks in other states that have cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars in response effort. The U.S. Geological Survey just released a study, I think it was this past December 2022, that found that the federal government has spent over $280 million on chronic wasting disease over the last 20 years. And that included like $16 million in indemnity payments to cervid farmers. So usually when CWD is found, they have to kill all of the animals, and then they pay the captive deer operators for those losses. And then the study found that state natural resource and wildlife agencies spent over $25 million just in the 2020 fiscal year alone on chronic wasting disease. So that's a massive amount of money without really doing anything to address the captive facilities that are very actively contributing to the spread of the disease. So I kind of liken that to trying to fix like a leaky faucet with a bucket. They're only treating the symptoms. They're not really tackling possibly one of the biggest causes of the spread. So I've been working on canned hunting for so many years that it still surprises me that there's still a lot of people who don't know that canned hunting is happening, or they have no idea the scale that it's occurring. But unfortunately, I'd say it's still a pretty unknown practice, or the public, when they hear canned hunting, they think about like canned hunting of lions in South Africa, or maybe they think it's only happening in Texas. They don't know how many states really allow the practice. But that's also because the industry wants it that way. They know the more opposition will be. So that's why public education on this issue is absolutely critical. And the media has covered this issue before, but more exposure is always needed. So despite the many multiple and clear arguments against canned, it's actually been surprisingly difficult to take down the industry. The HSUS does work with our allies to oppose captive hunting through state legislation, as well as agency regulations. And we're also constantly fighting to maintain prohibitions on canned hunting to exist. And these prohibitions, most fair hunter as well. So there have been some efforts in a variety of states to restrict or outright ban canned hunting. Bills were introduced just this year in Maine, Rhode Island, and New York to outright ban this practice. Unfortunately, they did not pass this year, but we, of course, will keep working on them and we'll keep pushing for them in future years. But a bill did pass in Minnesota this year that does at least crack down a little bit of white-tailed deer. And the new legislation requires adequate fencing to help prevent that transmission of chronic wasting disease from captive to wild animals. And, you know, it's a modest improvement. It's not as great as we would like to see, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. And we will keep pushing for things like that in other states too. And our fight on canned hunting continues. And that's it for me. And I think now we go to questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Samantha, for your important work on this and for shedding light on this. Like you say, it's something that canned hunting is something that our mind instantly goes to the African continent, instantly goes somewhere else. And it's happening right here on our doorstep. So thank you so much for your work on that. I think what I'm going to do, because technically we've only got a few minutes left, but I'm hoping people will just be willing to stick around at least for one question. Before we get onto questions, just to let you know, if you do have to jump off, then we'll be sending out an email with this recording tomorrow that will also have contact links for the speakers if there are any questions here today that aren't answered, and it will also link to their important work on these issues. I think if people can hold on just perhaps for this one question to which I want to pose to each speaker individually is, after watching all of this, after learning about all of this, can you give us one concrete thing that our audience listening today might be able to do to help you in your efforts? And if everyone wants to just turn their cameras back on and come back on screen, then if I start with going back to Katie, what can folk do?
So HSUS has a toolkit to end killing contests. It's an advocacy guide. I think it's, let me look it up. humanesociety.org/ I don't know. We'll send that link.
Yeah, we can. If you send that to us after the webinar, we can put it in the email tomorrow. We'll make sure that that's included. So
okay, thanks. Yeah, so it's a guide that goes over all the different kinds of things you can do. Like you can help raise awareness about killing contests by like submitting a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, just like a 200 little word opinion piece about why we should ban killing contests. Or in some states, you might be able to work on, if your state hasn't banned killing contests yet, you can work on resolutions, which are local city or county council like policy statements, basically, that they pass that condemns killing contests and calls on state policymakers to ban them. So you could go to your local city or county council and ask them to get involved, and they'll kind of like give this statement that is a statement to the legislature, to the state wildlife agency, that they want them to ban contests in that community.
That's great. Thanks, Katie. Same question to Melissa. What can people do to help protect snakes from rattlesnake roundups?
Yeah, so we also at rattlesnakeroundups.com, we have a list of things that you can do, but honestly, it keeps coming up both in the chat and in all of these presentations, how many people didn't know about all of this stuff. And so, and I think in the current like time in the US, we are much more likely to learn from people we already trust. So our friends, our family, our neighbors. So talking to them in a kind way, you know, not like, you know, you idiot, you support this or whatever. That can make a huge difference. We always talk about sharing positive stories about snakes, but raising awareness about these threats is helpful too. And if you're in a community where any of these types of events take place, letters to the editor can be very powerful. They're often overlooked. They're pretty easy to write. And I think that that's one to do. And as a member of that community that is supporting one of these events, your voice means so much more than any of these large organizations that we represent here.
That's great. Thanks, Melissa. And same question to Samantha. What can folk do about canned hunting?
Sure, it's pretty similar to what both Katie and Melissa said. We also have a separate toolkit on ending trophy hunting, in addition to the wild contest one, although that one's a little more focused on trophy hunting of native carnivores, but the action steps are still the same. Reaching out to your state legislators is a really big thing, getting to know who they are, letting them know what issues are important to you. Even just a few communications to them honestly makes a really big difference, especially state legislators. They really do listen to what their constituents say, and it doesn't outreach to really just make it known. So that would be the most important thing that I would say, is getting in touch with your local legislators. The letters to the editor are important just for public education, because I think for all of the different campaigns we've talked about, a lot of people just don't know that they're occurring or what they are. To help with public education is really useful.
Got it. That's great. Thank you all. And one last question, which any of you can answer really. I think something that's come up in some of the chat about like how we communicate with the people who are involved in this. And I think these are all really interesting subjects, because for once we find ourselves as animal welfare and animal protection organizations somewhat aligned with the hunting community, which is a kind of an uncomfortable bedfellow for a lot of us. So I'm just interested if any of you have got any thoughts on how you walk, basically how you walk that line and how you navigate kind of being on the same side as people were often not on the same side. How does that communication work? And that's any of you who want to answer.
So we've chose to focus. So we never say that we're wanting to ban or stop rattlesnake roundups. We talk about changing the roundups, stopping the slaughter at rattlesnake roundups, and I often draw, you know, so I try to, anytime I'm talking to somebody, I try to draw connections and on some sort of similar background. So I came from a rural town in the southeastern US too. So, you know, like you hear that especially thrown around because so much of this stuff is happening in the southeastern US that tends to be an easy way to demonize people, and no one's going to listen to you. So yeah, I talk about, you know, I understand, and I do understand the importance of festivals and events like this for economics for the local community. A lot of these places, this is the biggest thing they have going on. And so trying to find a way to make these, it's a little tougher with the killing contest and the canned hunts, but just trying to find, for people that are supporting these events, anything that you have in common and start there seems to be the most effective way to talk to people.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Sam or Katie, do you have anything to add?
I would just add that, oh, go ahead, Katie.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like nowadays we're so divided on so many things. So like, when it comes to some of these issues where we do have common ground, it hasn't been super difficult to try and work alongside some of these hunting groups on these issues. Usually we're all just excited to be able to build kind of a diverse coalition. And sometimes like trying to get anything passed in a state legislature, now you need one of those diverse coalitions. So sometimes just out and saying, hey, we disagree on a lot of things, but this is one thing where we have common ground. Can we work together on this is sometimes all it takes.
That's really interesting. Katie, what were you going to say?
I guess in the killing contest realm, it's not been that difficult because these hunters that we have been working with are like so opposed to killing contests, and you can see that they do not respect those people because those people are not respecting wildlife and not treating wildlife as they deserve to be treated. So I've found it, actually kind of easy to work with these people because we're working towards the same goal, and I can see that they have respect for wildlife, even though they're hunting.
That's great. I think that's really interesting and really important. It sounds like the communication is the kind of the linchpin, if you like, of this and the proposed success of this. So anyway, let's wrap up now because we've kept you all a little bit longer than we should, but it was all so interesting. Thank you so much for your presentations, and more importantly, thank you so much for your work. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out for your afternoon to learn about this. We'll be sending the follow-up email tomorrow with more information on how you can learn about Humane Society US and Snake Advocates work. And feel free to get in touch, info@bornfreeusa.org, if you have any follow-up questions or anything else you want to add. Thanks everyone for your time today. We really appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.